although I did consult with Top Gear. I popped out of the womb basically loving cars. And Ferrari was my first exposure to the ultra rich. It's very interesting, the difference between Ferrari customers and Lamborghini customers. And these guys, they would spend tens of thousands of dollars every weekend. And he had joined the Challenge series, but so he could basically drag other challenge drivers into a Ponzi scheme.
The second there's a picture of a new car, somebody's driving it in Florida. How do they do that? What has Leno got on you? If you had the windows open of the 928, you'd be deaf. And we were importing some really wild automobiles. A Swiss police car that Porsche built. You'd smoke the tires in second gear at 80 to 90 miles an hour. The officer is screaming his head off. And then it dawns on him that he's screaming at the passenger because it was a right-hand drive.
Money is the outcome of doing something well.
This is a sales call, and you probably want to hang up on me. I've stolen that, and it works.
If you want to be treated differently in the sale, you have to act differently. And most salespeople act the same way. They show up, they throw up, and they hope.
But when you're at one of those races, 24-hour race, your car comes around, every 4.5 minutes or whatever,
right,
to the turn where you are. How long can you watch that?
You want me to be honest? Jay will call me occasionally, sometimes once a year. You have to put the car in first gear and drive like 1.4 miles. And then you have to make a left turn. And then you go down the block and you have to make a right turn. And then you have to make a left turn. And then the engine light will go out. Zora Duntov sent me an LT1 350, 370 for the car. Joe Oldham, who was caught one time too many doing burnouts. We had an incident with American Motors. It's kind of an urban legend that the Hemis were that good. But I did drive a DeLorean at the GM Proving Grounds, and it was an absolute turd.
I have been reading stock car racing since I found my very first copy of it in a newsstand underneath the elevated train line on Fulton Street in Brooklyn, and throw up a clod of dirt about this big that would smack you right in the chest, which happened to me. The guy who beat Mario Andretti that night was Jim Hendrickson, who became a legend in modified stock cars on Long Island. Flemington Speedway, the most magical, unforgettable, exciting, compelling, filthy, dangerous, loud, eternally mobbed weekly racetrack I ever experienced. Your word is really what you are. It's not a thing. It's not a commodity. It's your being. It's your core.
Letter from Jaguar, in which they were threatening to cut off all their advertising. Road Track, as a magazine, has lived through the major significant events that have taken place in the auto industry over the last 70, 80 years. What was called the Woodward Garage, which essentially was a small, nondescript building on Woodward Avenue, but off the main campus in Highland Park. And being off the main campus meant that nobody except the people working there knew what was going on.
Jeff Stearns.
Jeff Stearns, my agent told me I was talking to Howard Stern today.
Well, my dad was a brain surgeon. I was always fascinated with the brain, and he was the doctor for the Tigers, Tiger Stadium, and I always went to home games with him, when there was a home game. But we never got to see a home game because he always got called into the hospital to do brain surgery, car accidents or gunshots or whatever. So he put me in the observation booth to watch some of these surgeries as a kid. So probably from the age of 8 to 10, I saw a lot of them with this poking around in the brain. So I got to see a lot of that, and that was kind of my passion. And that's the path that I wanted to go down. But he told me, no, you don't want to go down that path, because you got to cut through all the good to get to the bad. When you come back out, it's all bad.
He used to go through girlfriends. The first thing he would say before he asked for a number is, how many cars have you had registered to your name this year?
My dad asked me one day, he said, hey, Kevin, you're like, hey, what are you going to do this summer? I'm like, oh, Dad, man, it was a tough semester. I got beat up. I got to figure out what I'm going to do when I go back, next semester, this and that. I think I'm just spend this, summer kind of reflecting and figuring out, like where my path is and this and that. And he's like, wow, that sounds amazing. He goes, you have until next Friday to get a job, or I'm going to get one for you.
Europe, Middle East, Africa, India, living in Brussels.
My James Bond man crush on you.
It was a second life and the full deal, full expat treatment. Company was great. So yeah, apartments, cars, people, translators, you name it.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.